So hello everyone, welcome to the February Crane Research Forum. My name's Janelle Williamson. I'm the administrative coordinator here at the Crane Center. And my colleague Kathy Kupsky is in our chat box monitoring that for comments and questions, and we'll be sending out some housekeeping items there shortly. So we are so excited to have you all here for our first research forum of the semester. And based on previous feedback from our other events, we are doing things a little differently this semester. We are going to be featuring only Crane researchers so that you know what we've been up to the past year. So here to kick us off with that, we have Dr. Mitsu Nururi and Mr. Devon Croxton. So I will introduce them and then hand it over to them. So we have first Dr. Mitsu Nururi. She is the Director of Research here at the Crane Center, and in her role, she is here to support all Crane researchers and projects. And she specifically is working on the Childcare Access Means Parents in Schools, or CCAMPIS project, which you will hear about shortly. And she is interested in pursuing anti-racist research on access and equity in early childhood education. We also have Mr. Devon Croxton, who is currently working as a program assistant for 3 unique research projects at the Crane Center. So we keep him busy. His work consists of exploring challenges experienced by student parents in the university setting, conducting home assessments, observing the language development stages of children 7 to 9 months, developing AI systems that can transcribe language patterns between adults and young children, and analyzing the effects of innovative classroom settings. So Mitsu and DeVaughn are here with us today to speak on student parents in higher education. So now I will turn my video off and mute myself and turn it over to our speakers. Welcome.
All right. Hi, everyone. So DeVaughn and I are super excited to talk about our work with the CCAMPIS program. As Janelle mentioned, my name is Mitsu Nururi. I am the Director of Research at the Crane Center. And in general, I'm super excited to share this with you all. I am a higher ed scholar by training and study college students. And this, as I started in on this project, really, it really came to light what little we actually know about student parents on college campuses. And so we hope that you'll find some informative things here, some new insights, maybe things if you are from another campus or you work at another institution, maybe insights that you could take back as well. So I'm going to turn it over to DeVaughn just to give him a chance to briefly introduce himself as well.
Yep. So hello, everyone. My name is Devon Croxton. I am a program assistant on the CCAMPIS research project, and I'm also employed at the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy. Welcome. So before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the land where we do our work. We would like to acknowledge that the land that the Ohio State University occupies is the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. Specifically, the university resides on land ceded in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of tribes through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We want to acknowledge and honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical context that has and continues to affect the indigenous peoples of this land. And before we proceed with our research on student parents, we would like to propose a poll for you all to answer for us today. All right, so you should be receiving a poll window here. And the question for today will be, what percentage of undergraduate students are student parents in the United States?
Student parents, we mean students who are also parents to children, just to clarify.
Yes.
So take a guess.
Yep, there are no wrong answers here. Just want to see where everyone is at and representing this wonderful population of students throughout the United States, undergraduate students. Okay, so our results are in.
So it looks like we have most saying 35%, 10%, followed by 25%. All right, so next slide, DeVaughn, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the answer is actually a quarter of the undergraduate US population. So in general, college students, against college students who are also parents, student parents, are a really rapidly growing population. And so as I mentioned, it's a quarter of, they currently make up a quarter. I think it's also important to remember it's disproportionately communities of color and women that make up this population. And we'll dig more into our findings in the research, but in general, this group has a greater risk of not being retained or not matriculating. And I think even more so now as we look at the impacts of COVID-19 and the transitions that it has caused higher education.
So just as a little bit of background about the CCAMPIS project and the CCAMPIS National Program, the Access Collaborative's Childcare Access Means Parents in Schools Childcare Grant, authorized by the Higher Education Act and administered by the United States Department of Education, supports low-income parenting students at The Ohio State University by providing quality, licensed, nationally accredited campus or community childcare services for children 6 weeks to 12 weeks old. We also are in partnership with our wonderful partners at the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and we would like to acknowledge that they are implementing the CCAMPIS National Program, and we partner with them to perform the evaluation. As far as the timeline for the project, we are currently in year 3. So we began the fall of 2018, and this is year 3 of 5 for our research project.
And really, we're providing the research, but also we think about research and evaluation. This is also an evaluation as well, so that we provide feedback to them to make sure that they're providing the best possible service to the students. So yes, next slide. Okay, so what we know about student parents really comes from the community college literature. So we don't really actually know a lot, especially when we think about the large research institutions like Ohio State. So the issue is really, what do we really know about these experiences and what are the challenges that they face? And so how we're going to frame it today is looking at this through the lens of campus climate. So next slide. So campus climate is defined as attitudes, behaviors, and standards/practices that concern the access for, inclusion of, and level of respect for individuals and groups' abilities, or needs, abilities, and potential. And so really looking at sort of how do students feel on campus? How do people feel on campus? Do they feel like they're included? Do they have a sense of belonging? And so when you break that down, you can look at it in six different ways. So looking at universities' policies and services, access and retention, research and scholarship, curriculum and pedagogy, external relations, so relationships with the community, and intergroup and intra-group relations. I touched briefly the fact that we don't have a lot of research and scholarship on this group. And as we go through the results, we'll also explain some of these other things as well, and sort of how these come out and how students explain their experiences.
As far as some overall demographics for this year's cohort, we currently have 21 CCAMPIS participants, 11 of which are undergraduate students, 10 of which are graduate students. As far as our ethnicity background, you can see here from the graphic on the left that it is predominantly people of color who are within our cohort. And also I want to direct you to the graphic on the right-hand side, which acknowledges the numbers for the fall 2020 Pell eligible students with dependents. So in order to be a part of the CCAMPIS program, you must also be Pell eligible.
And also, sorry, we forgot to put in the numbers, but it is majority women, so that are currently in the program. As DeVaughn mentioned, for the CCAMPIS program, you do have to be Pell eligible. So we're actually targeting student parents who are also from a lower socioeconomic class as well.
So as far as our approach to gathering our research, we wanted to highlight a couple of different questions here. The first one is, what is the campus climate for student parents? How do they feel as far as their overall experience and perspectives when balancing their schoolwork and also their daily lives? Within the climate effect, we wanted to understand their sense of belonging. So once again, how welcoming they felt, their overall mental health when trying to manage everything within their lives, and their academic confidence. So how confident they felt that they were able to persist to graduation, as well as complete their coursework and exams. As far as our methodology, we took two different approaches. One was a quantitative approach as well as a qualitative approach. So for the quantitative approach, we decided to do a Qualtrics survey across two different time points. Once again, looking at these different measures of sense of belonging, mental health, as well as their academic confidence. Along with that, we decided to host two separate focus group sessions. During these focus groups, there was guided discussions around their perspectives as student parents, their ability to manage time, and just a deeper look at what it means to really balance their academics as well as raising a family. So as far as our survey results, here are the results for our three different measures across our two different time points. So if you direct your attention towards the blue section, that is the sense of belonging. That is on a scale from 0 to 10. And as you can see for time point 1, the score is relatively low at 5.63. And then even more significant, there's a slight decrease there at 5.38. As far as academic confidence, the scale is from 0 to 5. So we noticed that score was very moderate or solid. However, we did notice a slight decline from 4.03 to 3.81. Then as far as mental health, this was also an area of concern as the scale is from 0 to 12. However, they indicated scores of 6 and 5.86 respectively. Now, what we want to emphasize is that these scores are not statistically significant because our N value is so low for both time points, 9 and 7 respectively. However, we definitely want to emphasize what these mean on a broader scale, like thematically. To have a low sense of belonging and a low sense of mental health on campus is definitely an area of concern and something that needs to be explored a lot deeper.
Yeah, and just to clarify too, time point 1 was done around mid-semester, so October. And then time point 2 was done at the end of the semester. So that to also explain the slight decrease that we see across the time points. So, so I think for us, the biggest takeaway here is the sense of belonging and the mental health, and just the fact that overall they're not scoring very high at all. So before we transition into the qualitative, I feel like when we do webinar or lectures and webinars that there's never enough time to ask questions, or you might have questions. So I want to see if we certainly could take questions at the end, but if people have any questions about sort of the survey data first, we can happily take some of those. Or if not, I'll move on to the focus group and some of the qualitative findings. All right, give it 30 seconds here.
Sure.
We do have someone raising their hand. So if you have a question, you can submit that to the Q&A box, and then I will read your question on your behalf.
If that person wants to do that, we can answer that at the end, so I can go on to.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yep. Don't want to put the person on the spot. So, okay. So as DeVaughn mentioned, we had done some focus groups with the students as well. I'm going to go over some of the findings from the focus groups from this past semester, but also want to say that, this is year 3 of the project. And so we have done a few focus groups. And so some of the insights that I'm providing and DeVaughn providing as we go along is also a reflection of sort of all of the 3 years of the project. I don't think you do see sort of an impact of COVID, but overall, the sense of belonging, the mental health, I do think is still an issue, or has been an issue across these time periods. So, so when we think about intergroup and intragroup relations, students talked a lot about sort of their friend group or lack thereof. And so a quote here, "I have friends on campus, but I know we're not friends anymore. They feel like I can't do anything because I had kids. So if it's going out to lunch, they wouldn't ask or something, it's kind of difficult." So you can see that impact of having a child sort of takes away from, so quote unquote, being that traditional college student. This one also illustrates sort of the same thing. "I have friends on campus." Oh, wait, sorry, next slide. I've noticed that like people will talk differently to you when they find out you're a parent. I feel like the fact that they give me an excuse because I'm a mom, they think it's just some sort of disability, which I think is an interesting way to frame it, to have children, and just to see how other people view it as a negative thing. And the student saying it frustrates her to have that experience. And then students talked a lot about sort of really how, in reality, how unfriendly the campus can be for student parents. And a lot of things that personally I just kind of thought was interesting because I had never really thought about it. So first of all, when they talk about accessibility, so we often talk about disability accessibility, but that also means if you think about having a child, a small child, and having a stroller. So, saying a lot of the buildings are not accessible, but if they're not wheelchair accessible, that means also a stroller, you have to end up carrying it upstairs. And students literally talked about having to carry their stroller upstairs in order to get to class or to visit a professor and so forth. Also, I don't have a quote here, but students would talk about, and this obviously was more in pre-COVID times, talk about lactation rooms and having access to rooms. The rooms were often locked. They had to go somewhere to ask special permission, or then they couldn't find somebody. So while the university has lactation rooms, being able to access them easily can be difficult. And one student even described once having to just couldn't find a lactation room and ended up just breastfeeding her child in the hallway because the child was hungry. So, and then in pre-COVID times, when you think about our campus, during class change, it can get pretty crowded on the sidewalks. And so students would talk about, even when you're on the sidewalk and you're referring to a stroller, nobody moves over. There isn't enough room on the sidewalk to even push a stroller. And then finally, and this comes up as well as when you think about access and retention, students talked about the need for childcare, right? And so as if our campus, as if you're coming in from another campus, other campuses often struggle with childcare, right? Faculty and staff always need childcare, and we're fortunate to have childcare on campus, but it also often has a very long wait list. And so students know that. And so this one student said it would be nice to have a childcare center that was primarily for students so that you didn't have to fight with faculty and staff to get a slot. Next slide. Most importantly, when we think about the college experience for students, it's the classroom, right? Curriculum, pedagogy. And so students talked about how professors don't always understand the unique challenges that student parents face. And I thought this student really illustrated a lot of that. So, they say, "I send an email to my professors at the start of the semester to let them know about the situation. I put everything up front." And the student does say, usually everyone's accommodating and understanding, but there's always one professor who just doesn't understand or doesn't try to work with you. And then mentions that you would think because of COVID, they would be more understanding of these things, and that really wasn't the case. So next slide. And also, it also extends out to when, students often have to do field work or some type of clinical activity. And again, finding that professors are not always flexible. And so, because of COVID, and and there's been lots in the news about how parents are struggling to find childcare for their kids, virtual schooling, like all of these things. And so if you add being a student parent and maybe being in a major that's tied to some kind of field work clinical experience, that creates additional challenges. But this student was told because of board requirements, they have to complete the clinical, but that department was not really going to give the student any consideration because they were also a parent. And then as we think about access and retention, so for context for non-OSU folks, we used to have student housing for parents called Buckeye Village. In the last couple years, that has gone away. And so students really want that back. So talking about, when we think about access and retention of student parents, students say, that they really want that student housing, that there's actually nowhere for them to go right now. And they're just kind of told, go find yourself some housing. And this one student actually said they initially came to OSU because they had that housing. And so having that taken away has been a real inconvenience. And then students talked about kind of services that they think would help retain, help them in their retention and make it easier for them to get their education. So one talked about having a park on campus or a place with an inside playground. This way you can study and have your kids occupied. And the student really described how OSU can be like a family, but they just need to feel that sense of belonging, that community. And having a place for their kids to sort of be occupied and play on campus would be helpful. Next slide. And so related to that, not just sort of having long-term childcare, this idea of having like a drop-in service, because if you think about the life of an undergraduate student, you have class, you might have class from 8 to 10, and you might have a break and then you have like a 12 to 2 class, and then maybe you don't have to come back until 4. So there might be like an hour where you just need to somewhere for your kid to go for like an hour. And so having like a drop-off childcare place on campus is definitely a need. And one of our co-investigators, Dr. Kelly Pertel, is actually working with DeVaughn on another project looking at drop-in needs of student parents. And what they're really finding is that, yes, students really do need this drop-in care. And so this student was talking about that need that would help them in terms of their experience. And then as we think about the effects of COVID, the cost of childcare, this idea of having full-time versus part-time childcare and the cost is an issue. And CCAMPIS is a great program. It helps to subsidize, but sometimes you still can't get maybe all that you need. And so this student talked about how having 2 kids who go to school, one who needs childcare, but that this child goes part-time. So it's still challenging, you have to keep them at home 2 days, but that I don't really have a choice. If I want full-time care, I'd have to pay and I could not afford it. So as you can see, the recurring themes being sort of this idea of having access to affordable, meaningful childcare, housing. These are kind of the issues that they wish the university could help with. And again, programs like CCAMPIS are absolutely having an impact in helping students gain access to those, but clearly there is still a need within the greater population to have this type of work available. So next slide. We do want to say it's not all bad. So, students, this first quote is actually referencing the CCAMPIS program. And so, as I mentioned, it's a great service for student parents. So having the funding for childcare is night and day. We're still dipping into savings, but would really be struggling without it. So it's a lifesaver to have my kids looked at twice a week. And it's good, but it's good to know that they're safe. So when we are able to provide those services, I think it's a real relief for student parents and really can help them academically. And then in terms of professors, again, you have a few that don't understand the need of student parents, but this student talked about how her professors emailed her to ask her if she needed accommodations. They'd extend deadlines. She was able to do her internship online trainings and had her field instructor be very accommodating for her situation. So you do have professors and instructors who get it. I think it is evident that there still needs to be some education for the group, but it really, it really shows that we've made, we've made some progress. We still need a lot to go. We still have a lot to go.
So in summary, we definitely want to highlight a few findings that we noticed while conducting this research. First point being that student parents definitely identify having a low sense of belonging and mental health. And that based on the trend that we're noticing, that it's likely to go down over time with all things considered. They face various challenges, a lot of which are unique to their population, and definitely need to be identified and considered when you're looking at this through the lens of the campus climate. And then we're also noticing that universities are sometimes often ill-equipped to handle these various needs. As we identified earlier, as far as our qualitative research through our focus groups, things like finding space, pedagogy, classroom, and policy. These are definitely some things that could use improvement. Then, of course, more research definitely needs to be done to communicate these unique needs of this group, and also to show the efficacy of specific interventions. So the more research that we're able to build up around this topic and this population, the better we're able to intervene and help them persist to graduation. As far as some various recommendations, we definitely have to realize that this is a group effort. We are a network of professionals who are trying to collaborate and come together to help this student population. First of all, we definitely want to identify for policymakers, consider the holistic and unique needs of student parents. Things that Mitsu mentioned as far as transportation, access around campus, as well as interacting with various policies that surround all students as a whole. As far as researchers, we definitely need to continue to examine the efficacy of supports for student parents and understand how these the influence of institutional types, for example, community colleges versus universities. As far as higher education administrators, continue to improve campus spaces, help reduce the stigma surrounding student parents, help student parents connect and feel that sense of belonging, and that this is a true university family. And also consider the training that you have for your faculty and staff, as this will go a tremendous long way. If you're able to train them and to have them more equipped and acknowledge this population, the better they are able to serve them and perform as instructors. So for more information surrounding this research project, I definitely want to direct you to the CCAMPIS white paper, which has been posted on the link there on the official Crane Center website, as well as direct you to the Access Collaborative, which is on the ODI website, where they have extensive information about the Access and CCAMPIS program. Then I've also attached a QR code here for the CCAMPIS application. So if you know of any student parents, or if you are a student parent yourself, as someone watching this presentation, definitely want to direct you to the CCAMPIS registration, as we definitely want to encourage and increase the amount of supports that we provide.
And as DeVaughn mentioned, the white paper is a reflection of the previous 2 years' work. So our most recent set of findings, because the white paper just came out this past semester. So just as a heads up, it's not, we talked in our presentation about sort of the impacts of COVID. It won't necessarily have those types of references to it because it's for data from the previous time points, just so that people are aware. So next slide. And then finally, we just want to acknowledge our partners through all of this work. So the Office of Diversity, as DeVaughn mentioned, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, they are obviously the implementers of the program. So in particular, Dr. Yolanda Zapata, Tracy Lewis, Stephanie Fields, and Nasima Saidi. They are we're all partners in crime together through all this, and we have wonderful meetings once a month where we get to sort of talk about all of these issues and how we can best serve the students. So more importantly, we want to thank our CCAMPIS participants, the people who have taken the time to fill out the surveys, who have participated in the focus groups, who have really been honest and forthright about their experiences and have shared that with us. And as someone who is a qualitative researcher, I greatly appreciate when people are willing to be vulnerable and share their stories with us. And I think stories have a powerful impact on people's perceptions in general. And so cannot thank them enough for participating in the program. Next, just want to thank our colleagues at the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy in particular, Ruri Familia was one of the writers on the white paper. So I want to make sure she's acknowledged, and also want to acknowledge our co-investigators on this project. So Dr. Laura Justice and Dr. Kelly Patel, who have also, and actually Dr. Justice and Dr. Patel have been part of the project from the beginning. I started my position a little over a year ago, and DeVaughn not even maybe a year ago. So we are the newest people to the project. And so obviously this would not be at the state where it is right now without Dr. Justice and Dr. Patel's work to this point. So, all right, that is our contact info. And I see there are a few Q&A questions. We're going to take questions at this point. So.
Yes. Thank you again for presenting. And yeah, there are a few questions in our Q&A and you can keep them all coming, but I'll just start reading them off and provide your thoughts. So this first question, I believe, is referring to the slides in the quantitative section. It says, do you know if the time point to attrition was due to dropouts or something else?
I believe that the attrition was due to the current life situation. You're going into the end of semester, you're going into finals, everything that was going on between the pandemic, current events within the world. I think all of those definitely played a factor into a part of that attrition.
It's a hard, I mean, I think in general, when we do student surveys, A, it's hard to get students to fill out surveys. B, with this last semester being the, entire semester, most of it being online, we definitely noticed, at least, and also in talking with the students, there's a lot of stress in general. So we did our best, and our partners at ODI were wonderful in helping to try to nudge students to also try to fill out the time point surveys. But I would say it's also an ongoing challenge in general when trying to do survey research to students during these times as well. So.
Makes complete sense. Next question is, with a drop in childcare option on campus, that might not be the best for kids with unfamiliar caregivers. Any thoughts on how to make that better for kids?
Oh, good question.
Good question.
I think some of the options that I think have been considered is looking at, like I said, we do have childcare centers on campus. So are there, can we get trained? So not just hiring random people to sort of staff the drop in childcare. Can we hire, is there money to be able to hire some early childhood educators to be able to staff these, which, it doesn't necessarily eliminate the unfamiliar caregivers, but at least having caregivers who are trained to sort of work with kids that are that they're not necessarily familiar with right away, and so forth. To be honest, in the focus groups, that issue doesn't really, the students really just talked about really just wanting a place for their kid to be able to hang out. And so they have not really brought that up they don't see that as an issue. They just want the place to be able to drop in their kid. And DeVaughn can answer more probably, since he's part of the other study. But
yeah, I was gonna say that we can't underestimate children's ability to adapt as well. I think they're really good at making new friends, adapting to situations, and just that fresh dynamic, I think, would definitely be something positive. So I believe, yeah, at first you might have a little pushback as far as, I'm not too familiar with this caregiver, but over time, I think that's something that would easily be rectified.
Yeah, great responses there. So our next question is, why were the participant numbers so low? Were student parents not interested, or were they difficult to reach? With 25% of the student population being parents, it seems that more than 7 or 9 would be interested.
That is a great question. I think and DeVaughn knows, when we talk in our monthly meetings with ODI, we are constantly talking about this, because our colleagues have worked super hard to try to recruit and to advertise and let people know that, because we know the students are out there. I think some of it is that challenge of not necessarily wanting to disclose that they're a student parent. So for some of the intergroup, my quotes around intra-group relations, they're afraid to basically reveal that they are student parents because of some of that stigma that comes with it. And so We are certainly open, by the way, to other feedback on this. So if our contact information is on the slides, like feel free to email me and DeVaughn if you have ideas on how we can better recruit. But like I said, we spend our meetings, a lot of times spend our meetings trying to brainstorm ways that we can reach this population. But it is difficult, I would say.
Oh, yeah, I guess just to add on to that, I would say we definitely have to just keep in mind what their daily lives probably look like. I think, something like filling out a survey definitely would fall down the lines of priorities when it comes to, managing your children, um, completing your coursework, things like that. So I think that definitely played a big part into the numbers being so low. But like Mitsu said, I think once we remove that stigma, increase that sense of belonging, increase the marketing, just really open our arms to this population, I think the numbers will increase drastically.
Yeah, that's great. Next question. You're designing a childcare option on campus that would focus on student parents. What are some of the must-haves in this space?
Ooh. I'm trying to think, DeVaughn, if students have even talked about that. I think they did talk about.
Yeah, there were a few ideas that were kind of spitballed out, like, definitely stroller accessibility, which is also wheelchair accessibility. That's definitely a component. An area for studying, because sometimes I think the parents don't want to necessarily be so far away from their children, but they definitely want to have that area where they can focus quietly. Those are two things I could think of so far.
Yeah, I think they want to be able to sort of be able to drop in, but then maybe have a study space nearby, so they're not having to drop their kid off like on West Campus and go to main campus to be able to study, right? So having like location would be helpful, obviously, for them. And so I think that would be probably the biggest thing, and then again, it's that idea of drop in. And I believe, DeVaughn, in your other study, that a lot of that is really just 9 to 5. Like that's
absolutely, yes, during those work hours, which was very interesting to find out, which kind of correlates to, hey, I have to work or I have to go to class. I just need a little bit of help during the day. Throughout the evening, I pretty much have everything handled. But if I had someone to lend a hand out during the daytime, that would be a tremendous help. It's kind of the idea we got from our research there.
I saw a note pop up in the chat about parking assistance, which relates to location, especially at our university. I totally agree. Having somewhere that is actually accessible for people to drop off their children.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually the parking's interesting because in one of the previous, not this past semester, but one of the previous focus groups, students talked about the fact that, because typically on our campus, you have to go to West Campus and like get a bus to get to main campus. And that a lot of the buses aren't stroller. It's like trying to get a stroller on a crowded bus on West Campus. The students described being just really not possible, or they get strange looks, going back to that stigma, and not that they get strange looks from other students. And so again, pre-COVID times, that was definitely an issue. So
I feel like too, just to add real quickly, I think ironically, if we make these things more family friendly and accessible, that's going to reduce that stigma. So if you're a normal student and you get on like, oh, this area is for student parents, or if they have a stroller, it just kind of reduces that stigma and just makes it more normal. So they kind of go hand in hand. The more we support them, the more we can reduce that stigma.
That's a great point. Our next question is from Shireen. It says, what kinds of supports or programs for helping student parents do you think would be the easiest and most feasible to implement from the perspective of an administrator?
Well, I'm not going to speak for all administrators, but being a higher ed person, I do think that stigma piece, the education piece, right, is really important. So if it's partnering with a teaching and learning center to offer workshops on what the needs of student parents are, I think, I'm guessing if we did an informal survey to the general population, university population of instructors, many would probably not guess that 25% are student parents, right? And so if they realize that, then might take some time to learn more about those issues. I mean, I think that would be a start to help that education piece. Again, I will also say that my own bias here is that I'm a higher ed scholar and an educator. So I think, but that would be feasible. I mean, you know, these ideas around parking and accessibility, while absolutely needed, it definitely falls under, or housing for student parents, is definitely more of long-term at this point. It's not like I can snap my fingers and make that happen right away. But I do think we can make baby steps to just make sure that the general population understands that this population exists and has unique needs. So I don't know if you want to add anything, DeVaughn.
Yeah, I was going to say something as far as like an immediate change, incorporating more information about this population into trainings for faculty and staff. I think that's something that's very, you know, quick, that can be added to whatever normal trainings or presentations that already take place. And to say, hey, like when you're developing your curriculums or when you're setting up your classroom, be it online or in person, these are some things you want to consider.
Yeah, so these immediate action steps can be somewhat more personal advocacy and reducing stigma through trainings and all of that. With the long term being, let's get some different accessibility and things like that. Our next question is, something I've noticed with a lot of student parents is that while childcare is technically available on campus, it is outside the affordability of many. What can we do to address the often insurmountable costs of childcare to help students not have to choose between their education and their children?
I would say programs like CCAMPIS are certainly the first step.
Yes.
It's an ongoing issue. I mean, I think myself, I'm looking into childcare, and it's like I just can't imagine right now. Like the cost, I agree, the cost is and so it's not. And to also be a student on top of that, it is sometimes a choice between the two. So I do think we need more programs like CCAMPIS, so that and you know, CCAMPIS being a federal program, students do have to be Pell eligible, but I think there could be other ways, like you don't necessarily that, because plenty of non-Pell eligible students still could not afford the cost of childcare. So similar type programs would need to be out there to help these students for sure.
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head with that one. Just even with having more programs like CCAMPIS, it's increasing the outreach, increasing the marketing, just trying to reach as many students as we can and directing them to programs like CCAMPIS.
All right, our next question is, I have seen some professors, not at OSU, include a student parent statement in syllabi, just like a disability statement, mental health statement, etc. Is there a push to increase this at OSU? As a student parent and staff member, this would make me feel more supported.
That is a fabulous question. I'm actually, Dr. Patel and I are on a working group at the university looking at student parents, and I absolutely will be taking that suggestion to the next meeting. I think it's a great idea. So yeah, I don't have any response other than, yeah, I will definitely, I appreciate, and I see lots of other suggestions coming in through the chat. So again, this is why I like doing these kind of workshops. I think these are, as you know, if you're from another campus, you know that sometimes you can live in your own little bubble. So having these ideas are certainly helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, nothing more to say about that. That's an excellent idea. Something that students would, I'm sure, appreciate.
Yeah, let's get that implemented. Great ideas.
Yes.
Next question says, have you considered utilizing a local childcare resource and referral agency as a partner on campus to assist parents in finding necessary care while in classes? I can do that again.
No, I was gonna say DeVaughn could take that real quick. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat real quick.
No, you're fine. Okay, we're utilizing local childcare resource and referral agency as a partner.
Oh, as a partner. Okay.
Okay.
So I was to say that's probably a question for our ODI colleagues. Again, they're the implementers of the program, and so I know that Stephanie has looked to partnering with agencies. I'm not sure exactly which ones, so I think that's an item that we can definitely follow up with. So
yeah, it's being explored. I didn't want to misspeak on their behalf, but
yeah, I know they've.
I do feel like it's being explored.
Yeah, they have explored it. I know that. So.
All right, next we have, has there been talk to discuss about updating bathrooms that are family friendly? Wow, I can't talk. Family friendly. Being a dad, it is difficult to just find a bathroom with a station to change my infant or just counter space to change their diaper.
Yep, great question. Is that, like I said, we do have lactation spaces on campus, which, you know, dads could access, but again, I think that's another suggestion I would take back to our campus committee, because that's another issue that we often don't think about. So thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Great suggestions in here. Our next question says, did any parents mention the need or desire for financial support or subsidy or other types of childcare, or sorry, for other types of childcare like family members? Would that be something that could be financially feasible in the future?
To be honest, it hasn't come up in my time in working with the program. I can't imagine it wouldn't be an issue, though. I think as we think about multi-generational families that live in one household, but in general, at least the participants this semester didn't mention being part of a multi-generational household. But that would be an interesting avenue to study for sure. So.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Really quick, we have a follow-up to that bathroom space. Are dads allowed to access lactation spaces?
In general, they are. The ones that I know of on campus are accessible for dads. So, so it depends. I think it probably depends on the actual space, but most of the lactation spaces are gender neutral. So.
Okay, that's great. Good to know. Our next question says, when you are looking for research on student parents, what do you find is the biggest holes in the data? What would be the top 3 subjects you would like to have more institutional data on? Also, do you notice a shift in demographics between undergraduate and graduate students? Like single parents, undergrad, couple parents, and grad programs. So I can reread that if you need to.
No, I can see
No,
it.
that's fine.
Yeah, I can see it as well. Oh gosh, there's like 5 questions there in one. So biggest holes in the data, definitely not a lot on universities. So you're looking at a lot of it is on community colleges. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, I think. But at the same time, if we think about what community colleges provide versus large universities or even liberal arts colleges, I mean, I think there's definitely holes when we think about that. What things would you like to have more institutional data on? It's actually really hard to find out who's a student parent.
Yeah, who they are. Yeah, finding them. Yeah.
Because so the data we provided around Pell eligible student parents, it's because they have to Pell eligible students have to fill out the FAFSA. If you don't fill out the FAFSA, we have no way of knowing that you are a student parent on this campus. And so that is probably the biggest challenge, is like, we know there's 480 plus Pell eligible on our campus, but who knows, there's very likely a much higher number that are student parents. The shift in the demographics, I personally haven't read a lot of literature for undergrad versus grad on this issue. I know DeVaugh's read some of it as well. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're speaking of like, you know, gender or ethnicity or things like that, but yeah, I'm not necessarily noticing that big of a shift. And I think it's just because our sample size is relatively small right now. So going back to getting more institutional data, I think if we're able to look at it on a larger scale, we'll notice more of that shift. But with our particular cohort, it's pretty balanced on both sides.
Well, great. That's all helpful information on knowing the gaps in the data and where other researchers could be looking into. Our next question, and I'm double checking our time. We have 3 more, so I think we'll be able to get through them. A lot of students and staff and faculty don't know that Title IX has some protections for pregnant and parenting students. What can be done to increase awareness of this?
I would also say that the education piece, so not only education for faculty and staff, but also for students. Again, because of that stigma of being afraid to sort of reveal yourself as being a student parent, students often don't know often don't know that that's available to them. Now on a previous campus I worked at, I know students had to go through like a Title IX training. I actually don't know if they have to do that at OSU, but it would be nice that, you know, like I said, on my previous campus, all students had to go through a Title IX training. So even having that training, make sure it mentions student parents and pregnant women in there, I think would also be helpful as well.
Yep. I was thinking maybe incorporating it into applications as well. Or even if you're just marketing your campus. So if OSU is like, hey, here are some things that we offer, just more communication about it in general.
Yeah, that's helpful. Our second to last question is, how can we make it feel less competitive between faculty and student parents because they may be competing for childcare spots?
Ooh, that's a question that's probably beyond my pay grade. Ooh, I mean, I think that's a tough one because it is so, particularly on our campus, it's very competitive. I mean, you know, faculty and staff can be on wait lists for years to be able to get in, and so I think it's a longer term thing where you really, like one of the quotes mentioned, having a separate opportunity for students to have childcare. So just eliminating having to compete with faculty and staff in general. But again, I think I'm going to guess it's also not an issue or unique to OSU as well, that's probably a issue on many campuses.
Yeah, also probably above my pay grade too, but I just say more infrastructure. I just leave it at that.
All right, our last question is, are you Pell eligible if you are a graduate student?
So on the application, you do have to provide some income information, I believe. And so our colleagues at ODI work through that to determine if a graduate student could be eligible for the program. So they basically want you to sort of, the idea is you should be in that income bracket that would make you Pell eligible. So but they, again, being the implementers, I don't want to try to provide the details behind that, but they work with graduate students who apply to make sure that they are qualified and eligible to enroll in the program. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for all of your questions. This was a really great discussion, and thank you again, Mitsu and DeVaughn, for presenting. I just want to note that when you leave the webinar, you will be directed to a very, very short survey that will give us feedback on this event and help inform our future events. So please take the time to fill that out, and thank you again for coming.
And actually, before we go off real quick, I just want to direct people to the chat. I believe someone from ODI they are doing a National Student Parent Support Symposium coming up. So I believe it's going to be virtual. So I don't want folks to miss that opportunity to get more information. We completely are just touching the tip of the iceberg on this. And so by no means what DeVaughn and I have presented is meant to be the end all be all on this information. And there are lots of good discussions happening nationally on this. So so please go to that link if you are interested in learning more, and again, happy to take questions. Feel free to email us afterwards. I saw some comments in the chat that I was trying to respond to. So if it means connecting you with our colleagues in ODI, I'm happy to do so. So if we can't answer it, we'll be happy to make sure that you get the connection. So
great. All right, well, thanks again, everyone, and we will see you soon.